All right. So this is part two. My computer ran out of room, or so I don't know. The system shut me down on that last one. Sorry about that. So this is week five, part two. Here we go. So emergency preparedness. So the point of this slide is when you're talking about natural disasters, there's different kinds of things that you need for different kinds of natural disasters, right? So a winter storm, you need sources of heat. You need blankets. If there's a major wreck on the highway and it's 20 below, what do people need? People need to stay warm to survive. They're going to die if they don't get warm, potentially, right? So that's one thing. Um, uh, Floods, they need something to float on. Heat waves, they need water, right? So, and I know that sounds very almost childlike simplistic, and obviously it's a little more complicated than that. But conceptually, that's what I want you to understand about this. And you can go through it in the textbook and look at some of the different details of that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time emphasizing all that. Um, Hostage situation. Wow, oh wow, oh wow. What do you do? So people go. There is the Stockholm. I always think of the Stockholm syndrome, where someone begins to feel sympathy for the hostage. I hope I never experience being a hostage, but I hope I can fight off the Stockholm uh, uh, syndrome if that happens, where they would actually defend or feel sorry for the perpetrator. But that's a whole other, is your organization prepared for a hostage situation? How do you deal with it? What do you do? What do you do in the midst of it? And what do you do in terms of helping people recover from it on the other side? All right, so that is that slide. And then the last one that we're going to talk about today. Remember, I said there's two on emergency preparedness. I'm going to put them both in Blackboard. And then this one we're going to talk about dealing with children and adolescents in crisis. So we moved away from specifically sexual abuse crisis of sexual abuse. Although that there's that too, right? I mean that's the same but different. Um, but we're looking at just crisis in general and dealing with them when it comes to children and adults. So one of the main concepts when you're talking about children is they don't have the cognitive ability, they don't have the emotional maturity, sometimes they don't have the words needed in their language, a large enough repertoire of words to really express their feelings of trauma. Not to mention the fact that trauma is so overwhelming, it's difficult to. I hope y'all read in the textbook the Travis Avenue Baptist Church shooting. Sorry, my finger touched the computer and it jumped. This was in Fort Worth, and I had friends that were in this church, and I remember this very well. This was a big deal in our community several years ago, and a lot was learned. This church sponsors trainings on church safety, and they do an excellent job of teaching. And this pastor that was there talks very movingly and very powerfully about his story. That's something you could probably Google and or YouTube and find some cool stuff about. That was a very just sad, crazy situations. That was um, yeah. Okay, enough said about that. Sorry. Um, Children experience trauma very differently than adults do, based on the event and the level of trauma. And they're not that they don't judging what is traumatic and what is not is difficult sometimes with children because it's going to be so different between adults and children as to what is viewed as traumatic. Sometimes it's obvious, like I mean, if you see someone killed right in front of you, or see somebody run over by a car, I don't care who you are, or how old you are, that's traumatic, but still dealt with or understood differently from a child than it is from an adult. um, they don't process things like we do, and we're going to talk about right now, we're going to talk about, as I say later, but right now we're going to talk about uh, Jean Piaget. Piaget was I know he wasn't always old, but all the pictures in the textbooks, he's this little old man, right? So if you ever study human development or have a developmental class, it is you're going to talk about Piaget. And I love Piaget. He loved children. He was brilliant. And he was one of the first to really lay out the different stages of development. So, in other words, he was the first one to say, you know, the kid's brain is very different in terms of how it processes information. So, if you have a problem that a 10-year-old can solve, but a 5-year-old can't solve, it doesn't mean that the 5-year-old is stupid and the 10-year-old is smart. It means developmentally their brain does not have the capacity to solve that type of a problem yet. So that's what we're talking about in terms of different developmental stages. There's also certain tasks, if you will, with each developmental stage. So birth to 2 is the sensory motor stage, and this is literally just connecting sensory input with motor activity. So touch, taste, feel, smell, movement, those manipulation of objects, basic simple things. Pre-operational stage is ages 2 to 7. This is where they begin to be able to solve very, very simple problems. They can communicate a lot more effectively. Their repertoire of words, their language has increased dramatically. It increases dramatically during that time. This is a stage of pretending, lots of pretending. They will take an inanimate object and make it lifelike. They can take a block and make it into anything, pretend that it's whatever, right? A house or a person, whatever their little imaginations want to pretend that it is. The next stage is concrete operational stage, and this is an interesting stage because at some level they have fairly sophisticated problem-solving skills sometimes. They can create stories and imagine scenarios. One of the games that we enjoyed in our family with my children was we would say, okay, so let's tell a story, and I'm going to give you 3 words, and you tell a story based on these 3 words. And I'll say house, lion, trees, right? And so they're like, oh, and they love this, right? I mean, oh my goodness. Well, this age that's a great age for that game because, man, they're like, okay, so this person came out of his house and he was walking through the trees and there was a bunch of trees. I guess you'd say it was a forest, and then they saw a lion and they ran and climbed a tree. And I mean, you know, there's just, it goes on and on and on. So they can create this stuff, and it's exciting and fun. Now they still don't have a whole lot of abstract jokes. They don't get jokes. I tell a story that illustrates this perfectly. That they're very concrete in their thinking, right? Concrete operational stage. So Laura Beth was about 10 years old, and her sister were arguing about something. And it was one of those times where if you have children, you'll understand this, right? You remember back to your childhood. Her and one of her sisters were arguing about something, and they would not stop. Oh my goodness! And I was like, guys, quit. Just no, stop. And after multiple tries of that, and Laura Beth was the one that was 10 at the time. She's my youngest. Particularly was just adamant, man. She was not letting this go. And I said, Laura Beth, let it go. I said, drop it. Laura Beth, drop it. She had a glass bowl in her hand on the tile kitchen floor. They were clearing the table. She looked at me with the most like, look, and went, poof, and dropped the bowl on the ground. And oh, we just all died laughing. That was the end of that. But that's a perfect example of concrete thinking versus abstract thinking. So it's an abstract concept. Drop it. Stop talking about what you're talking about. Drop it. But in her little mind, it was concrete. Drop what I have in my hand. Like, I don't know why he wants me to do this, but okay, boom. It was hilarious. It was just an absolutely hilarious moment. Perfect illustration for this concrete operational stage. Okay. So when you're working with children, you really need to be aware of their developmental level. Now, the good thing is you don't necessarily have to remember this, remember the details of developmental level. And there's multiple. I mean, that's just Piaget. You know, there's multiple different, and we're much more detailed and accurate and specific, and much of Piaget's work was shown to be accurate as science progressed, but some of it has been modified. But the concept is there, right? So there's different stages, and we need to be aware. We can Google anytime you're in a situation, you're looking at a kid, you're like, uh-oh, how old are you, kid? Okay, Google. I mean, you time out, right? I gotta go to the bathroom. I'll be right back. Google developmental stage. Get a quick hit on what is their brain like. If you're not sure, if you work with kids all the time, you'll know, right? You know your kids. If you're a Sunday school teacher, you need to know. You need to be teaching. You're teaching these abstract concepts about Jesus living in someone's heart, and they're just picturing this little, like Jesus somehow got really little, and there's this air pocket in my heart, and Jesus is walking around in there. Wow, okay, cool, whatever that's about. That's kind of strange, but okay. No spiritual benefit whatsoever, right? So we need to be mindful of the capacity of the children that we're working with. If the child feels supported, um, the more they're supported before, during, and after a crisis, man, it helps uh, uh, tremendously in terms of their ability to cope. If they feel helpless, hopeless, helpless, vulnerable, then that just increases anxiety tremendously. Um, One of the things that kids learn, and I think we have to be honest with kids about, is parents cannot always protect us from harm. Like, oh, there's a scary concept. Well, that's right. We do our best, but we cannot always. You don't ever want to promise a kid something you can't do, right? I promise nothing bad will ever happen to you. Whoa, no, no, no. I'll do everything in my power to protect you always, but sometimes bad things happen beyond what I can protect you from. And that's where we count on God and trust God to take care of us from there. And if something bad happens, trust God to help us pick up the pieces on the other side of it. Um, they are unable to express their emotions oftentimes. Again, that goes back to cognitive ability. That goes back to they don't have the words for it. They don't know how to. They may appear that they're fine. It doesn't bother them at all, but you want to be careful about that because they mask it with play or laughter, and they just go move on because they can't deal with it. They don't know how to deal with it. They do through play. Oftentimes they'll recreate the scenario. Sometimes they'll recreate the scenario and then they'll change it to make it safe to where somebody came in and rescued them or made it stop. Stopped the water and the tsunami or whatever the case may be. Um, so play is something that we need to encourage and allow and help them express through play. And you don't have to be a play therapist to figure some of this stuff out, right? So you're replaying the event. All right, let's get into this with them, and that can be really helpful as well. They may regress, go back to previous stages. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Use some of these examples, actually potty training and regressing, becoming clingy when they were not clingy. May not be able to sleep alone when they were to the point where they could sleep alone. Boy, spell check just flipped out over potty, right? So when I put lose potty skills, they're like, wow. So I, I never did figure that one out. I still didn't like that, but nonetheless, you know what I'm saying, right? And again, if you have kids, you really appreciate that whole potty training process and time of life. It's a very interesting time of life. They may express anger, they may express sadness, but they're going to do that differently than adults. Sometimes they do it through becoming very passive, withdrawn, internalizing, or they may act out. Act out meaning negative behavior, external negative behavior. They can be extreme or moderate or mild, obviously. Um, so we want to, how do we help them? One of the things we do is we maintain a routine when a child is traumatized. Routine is very, very important for children. It gives them a sense of stability. And when I say routine, I'm talking about as much as you can literally have the same things happen every day. We don't need to have dinner at 5 one night and 10 another night and 8 the next night and 6 the next night and 10 the next night. And, let's give it as much structure as you can and keep that going as much as possible. Physical contact. I tell you, we need touch. Our children need our touch, mom and dad's touch. So give them lots of touch. Play with them. Appropriate affection. Hold them if they want you to hold them. Wrestle with them. That's touch too, by the way. Lots of touch. One of the things that we've established in our family that's been really powerful is back rubs and foot rubs. And so we do that with each other a lot. We have this saying: one of us will walk up and say, "Hey, will you do five? Will you do 5-on-5 with me?" That means I'm going to rub your back for 5 minutes. You're going to rub my back for 5 minutes. I'm going to rub yours for 5. You're going to rub mine for 5. I wasn't sure if I said that right, but you got it. And I tell you what, you talk about a teenager getting a foot rub, they will talk. They'll tell you all kinds. It's golden, golden. But it's also it's physical affection. It's a beautiful and powerful thing. Doesn't have to be exactly that, but touch is a good thing. Is bottom line. Okay, let them play. Sometimes people are like, "Oh, you're playing, and we're over here grieving." Well, that's how they grieve. That's how they process stuff. So allow them to play. Let them play. Playing is central. It's extremely central for children. So let them do that. um, Give them as much power and mastery of their environment. They can make little decisions. They can even make family decisions that are inconsequential, but give them the power to make a decision. You want to go to McDonald's or Burger King? Let them make the decision and run with it. Don't put something out there. Don't give them a choice that you're not willing to. Oh no, we're not going to McDonald's. They say McDonald's, and you go, no, 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 no. You can't do that. That's not healthy. That's not good. Um, and don't let them parent you. Don't let them comfort you. If they're coming to you and, oh, mommy, you're sad. I'm so sorry. You know what, baby? Yeah, I'm sad, but I'm okay. Yeah, I'm all right. I cry on daddy's shoulder and you cry on my shoulder. It's okay to tell them that. I mean, it's like, I'm good. I'm okay. Don't worry about me. Yes, I am. I'm gonna be honest. Yeah, I'm sad, but I'll be okay. Don't let them play that role because kids will if you'll let them oftentimes. Listen, 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 listen lots, listen intently. I'll never forget the time that my oldest daughter, Anna, was about 2 years old, and I was not listening to her. She was trying to talk to me, and I was being a horrible listener. And I finally she yanked on my pant leg and tug and daddy, daddy, and I was like, what? And I looked at her. She said, look at my ice, daddy. Look at my ice. And I was like, oh my goodness, the power of understanding that I'm really not listening to her. Man, I stopped. I got down on my knees. I got right there in her face. I said, okay, baby, I'm sorry. What's up? I mean, just right. And man, they can feel it. She was like, oh, okay. Now I can tell my story. And she talked. It was wonderful. So do that with them. Be honest. Be honest. Yes, it's painful. Yes, it's difficult. We're going to get through this as a family. Yes, our house blew up, or yes, our house burnt down, or yes, our this is gone, or yes, your brother is dead and gone. Not quite say that, but that way. I probably would. I mean, I am very. I'm not asking, culturally and whatever, all for everybody to be like me, but I am pretty brutal with my honesty when it comes to negative and painful events. And at the same time, you don't have to tell them. I mean, if 5 years old, right, you limit, so to some degree, you limit what you tell them. um, died in a car accident, but you don't have to tell them their head was ripped off and their guts were hanging out. I mean, you don't give details to a kid like that, and that's what I mean in terms of don't tell too much. Sorry if that freaks anybody out, but literally, we're talking about crisis, right? Um, Answer their questions honestly and sincerely, again, without telling them more than you have to, more than you, based on age appropriate. And don't make promises you can't keep ever. Um, I'm going to promise you that we'll never have a severe car accident like this ever again, baby. Yeah, you can't promise that. It can happen in a minute. So just don't make promises to kids that you cannot keep. Um, when there are um, it's hard sometimes to know, like, okay, does this kid need counseling? So let's say you've done all these, this previous page, right? You've done all this stuff to help them cope, and you've listened and you've supported, and you've loved, and they're still just an absolute disaster, and they're struggling, it's not working. Maybe even it's escalated to some self-harm thoughts or even behaviors. Sometimes it's risk-taking stuff. They're just doing crazy things, acting out, doing poorly at school. They're just not functioning at some point, or they continue to stay in a regressed state or regress worse. It's time for counseling. Get a play therapist. Make sure they're specialized in kids, love kids, It's okay to vet to them. You can go and meet with them first and talk to them, and you're basically interviewing them. So look, I'm fixing to give you my kid, and I'm here. I mean, I'll come however much you want me to come. I'm not saying here fix my kid. Please don't do that to a counselor. Oh my goodness. Um, but um, but get them in counseling. And kids, I remember that kids are resilient. They're very resilient. They are fragile. They're very fragile, but they are very, very resilient. They need love. They need support. They need help. They need sometimes counseling. But children are very resilient, and they do tend to bounce back from these situations. Okay, so that's the end of children, and now we're going to switch to adolescence. Adolescence, guys, I love adolescence. Adolescence is such a crazy time. There's high highs and low lows, and they can flip in just a matter of seconds back and forth from one thing to the next. And if you have teenagers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Or if you've worked with teenagers, one of the volunteer positions in that my wife and I have done frequently is we have um, volunteered working with teenagers and youth groups, and so I love teenagers, and but they can be all over the place. They are going through and experiencing drastic changes physically. Um, eh, well, yeah, I'm trying. I don't know how much detail to get into it because then I turn around and next slide or three rows later I explain something more. So physical growth. Challenges with coordination as a result of rapid physical growth. That's oftentimes more common in boys when they hit their big growth spurt, kind of middle school, maybe freshman in high school. Um, you're at that age where the girls are a head taller than the guys, and then you come back the next summer and it's the other way around. It's like, wow. I was like, okay, he grew 8 inches over the summer, a foot. It's like, it's just amazing how that can happen. In their brain, there's things are changing all the way up to probably about age 25. There's some things happening. We'll talk a little bit more later. And emotionally, it is an absolute rush and a half of a roller coaster ride as they go up and down. They're probably their greatest developmental task is identity. Who am I? They've got to negotiate puberty and sexuality and understanding how that works within themselves as well as between the opposite sex. Um, they begin to back to kind of Piaget, some of Piaget stuff. This is where their abstract thinking skills and reasoning skills match many adults, especially by the time they get 17, 18-ish. They're there to a large degree. um, and this rewiring process in the neurons, which I started out talking about a little bit, is all the way up to like age 25. They're particularly in the prefrontal cortex and frontal lobe, where higher functioning reasoning, uh, uh, personality, emotion control happens, and that's where all that's changing until uh, that's where our most complex decisions are made too. And interestingly, what do we decide between ages 18 and 25? Most of the time, we choose our life mate and we choose our career. It's kind of like, oh, great. They go back to that childhood egocentrism where everything is kind of about them. If you've been around teenagers, you know that. We just said to our youngest daughter, she's 17, we're like, Laura Beth, it's not all about you. Sorry, baby. And she's like, I know, I know, I know. It's, I mean, they tend to be a little bit, I am the center of the universe, and if it's happening and it's irrelevant to me, then oh well. But most stuff that happens is all about me and relevant to me. And it's like, no. They can be very impulsive and therefore also take a lot of crazy risks. That can be with driving. That can be, hey, let's go run, jump off a bridge into the water. That can be race to get across the train before the train comes by. I mean, there's kids still do all kinds of things, but they'll take risks sometimes that are um, as calculated as they may seem. Oftentimes they're driven by impulsivity, and they can scare adults to death. I think of kids driving the motorcycle down the road at 100 miles an hour and doing a wheelie at the same time. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but I've actually seen that happen on Dallas North Tollway, and it's like, oh my, I hope we don't see a splatter on the road down the way. That's just wow, you got to be kidding. Sometimes the risk behavior is to the point of suicidal. Um, Teenagers also have thinking errors. Parents, please don't be so clueless, right? Sometimes it's like, oh, yeah, you're blogging. I don't know what that is, but I want you to stop, right? So, one of the things that I have done frequently with my children, in fact, it's really hilarious because they're like, wow, Dad, you're cool, you're amazing. They will text some uh, you know, what is it called when you use like LOL, right? Whatever that's called, right? We all know that means laugh out loud, hopefully. So they'll text something, and instead of asking them, hey, what does that mean? I'll jump over real quick and Google it, find out what it means, go back and answer appropriately. They're like, wow, Dad, you know what that means? I'm like, of course. They are so impressed. It's hilarious. So if you don't know what blogging is, Google it. What is blogging, right? Before you address a kid about it. Because our IQ in their mind goes down as they are teenagers. Parents' IQ goes way down. Other people, not so much. But if you've got a good relationship with them and you're a counselor or a minister and you're ministering to them, you're probably not as, quote, stupid as their parents are, or at least they don't think. You might be the same age as their parents, but you're okay because you're not their parents. But your parents are absolute idiots. It's really hilarious to watch that as well. So anyway, common thinking errors, all or nothing thinking. Um, it's either this or this, and a lot of times it's a mixture of both. Drawing conclusions, but they don't really have enough evidence. Oh, she hates me. Why does she hate me? Well, she looked at me funny. Yeah, she may have been thinking about something really else and whatever. But no, I'm sure it was about me. And okay, she hates you. I'm so sorry. Uh, I'm not saying that's how you handle that, but those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. Preoccupation with what's fair and unfair. Boy, they want to change the world to make something fair. If it's unfair, oftentimes, at least some kids, depend on the personality. And I love teenagers. I see these two pictures, and it's like, wow, I just want to go sit down by that boy in the locker, and just say, all right, man, talk to me. What up? What's going on with you? Um, anyway, that's just my heart. I just love teenagers. Um, So 1 second they can sound very mature and adult-like in their dealings with a crisis, and the next minute they're crying and talking like a little kid about it. It's like, oh, just understand that's normal and work with them, and it's fine. They can misinterpret and perceive wrongly events, and usually that's when I say wrongly, I'm talking about two extremes, right? So you just have to work with them and be patient with them on that. A lot of times just listen and they'll figure it out later. It's funny. That's like they calm down. They're like, yeah, that was a little off the wall, huh? And you just kind of grin and nod. Yeah, that's all right. Um, their emotions do change very rapidly, and many and or most experience their emotions very intensely. Um, Also, be aware of their behaviors. It could be anywhere from acting out, violence, starting fights, vandalism, crazy stuff, driving crazy, wrecking cars, uh, to very withdrawn, isolation, shutdown kind of stuff. So you just have to be aware that you're going to get a lot of that. Obviously, if it's concerning, then that means we're not we're not doing well. Houston, we have a problem, right? So that's okay. So how do we help teens? We really need to be patient with them. We need to listen, listen, listen. I am I've been toying with the idea for quite a while of doing a parenting seminar for parents of teens, and I would call it um, "Shut Up and Listen" Teen Parenting Seminar. Shut up and listen. Parents just, I want to scream and pull my hair out. It just, the kids start talking and they're like, well, you shouldn't think that way, or well, that's not right. And blah, blah. It's like, whoa, dude, would you shut up? Like, that is not helpful. If you think for 1 minute that you're gonna, yeah, well, okay, now the kid's definitely gonna, because you just told them they can't. So just listen, just listen. Don't be so threatened and freaked out by what they say. They're going to say some really crazy things. So just listen. Listen, 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 listen. Use your reflective listening skills. A lot of time, normalize feelings. A lot of times they'll finish and they'll calm down. They'll be like, "Okay, that was crazy," and you just, yeah, they will. They really will. I mean, if you give